Anywho, urban exploration has been a hobby of mine for a few years. Me and my best friend will try and find the coolest abandoned buildings wherever we are and just go check them out. It's always a good time, but once it was absolutely terrifying. One day we get the idea to go into an abandoned insane medical asylum in the city. He'd been in before and said it's super creepy, and I wanted to see for myself. Originally there were only going to be 3 of us, but eventually we had accumulated a group of 6. For those of you who never go abandoned building hopping, anything more than 3 or 4 is asking for trouble. It's a felony, and the more people, the more noise they make, the more likely it is you'll get caught. So I wasn't thrilled with the arrangement, but I wasn't about to let that ruin the night. I mean, it's an abandoned asylum. How intriguing is that? Another thing about the asylum that you need to know, it's 17 stories tall, and smack dab in the middle of an active, routinely patrolled medical campus. The monolith of an asylum is the only thing not lit up at night. All of these things make it one of the more risky places to break into, but that's not even the worst part. There's only one way in/out of that building. A 3rd-story window that you can only access by climbing a pallet stack and then a brick wall, climbing across a door overhang, jumping onto a separate roof and then pulling yourself up to and through the broken window. Nice and precarious. So we run up to the building, head up through the window 3 at a time, and begin exploring the building. It was really cool, mostly just decaying ceilings, walls, and graffiti, but some of the rooms had old surgical tables and tools. One room had a drawer full of unidentifiable pills. There was a morgue with all the pull-out beds that my friends proceeded to take pictures of themselves lying on. So some pretty interesting stuff. The only things concerning me were that a couple of my friends were taking pictures with flash, clearly visible out the giant glass-paned windows, and one guy who was with us kept breaking shit and laughing. Side note, for those interested in urbex, don't be this fucking guy. Nobody likes that guy. He gets you caught, he makes too much noise, and he's breaking shit unnecessarily, which ruins the mystique for future explorers. That guy is a dick. Despite all of that bullshit, we make it through most of the floors and up to the roof without incident. The 6 of us spent around half an hour on the roof just chatting and ducking below the wall whenever security would make their routine passes around the campus. Every time they'd pass through, someone would say, "Security," and everyone would duck down for a minute or so, after which time someone would peek over the edge and say, "They're gone." And we'd stand up and continue taking in the sights and chatting. I started to notice security coming around more and more frequently, and one time, the security truck stopped altogether and 2 uniformed guards got out and started pointing flashlights at the top of the building. At this point, my oh shit bar is around a 4 out of 10. They obviously saw us, or saw something on the roof, but there was still a good chance they would get back in the truck and drive away, as long as we kept quiet. My friend peeked over the edge after about 5 minutes and whispered, "They're still here." Oh shit. Oh shit, 6 out of 10. They definitely saw us. This is not looking good. 10 more minutes pass and my friend peeks over the edge again. He comes back down with a terrified look on his face. With a desperate and forced whisper, he said, "Guys, cops." Fuck. 10 out of 10. I'm getting arrested. There's no fucking way we're getting out of here without going to jail. There goes my clean record. I swear this alone got my sweat running and my heart racing. but it was nothing compared to what happened next. We decided that we needed to get the hell back down to the 3rd floor as soon as possible. As quietly as we could, we clambered back over the roof ladder and down the roof access hatch back onto the 17th story stairwell. As soon as everyone was back in the building, we started to head down flight after flight of stairs, with me leading the pack. It was pitch black, and despite trying to be as careful as possible, we were making a shitload of noise. I mean, there wasn't a way around it. We were a herd of terrified 20-somethings in a pitch-black abandoned asylum running downstairs towards the cops to get away from the cops. Around the 13th floor or so, I heard a noise and told everyone to stop and shut up. The air was super still and everyone was frozen. Out of nowhere, a metallic, metronomic banging sound reverberated through the stairwell. Bang, bang, bang. The only thing comparable to that noise and volume was the sound of my buddy's breath through his respirator. Asbestos is a thing. Suddenly, the banging stopped. I really wish I had a heart rate monitor for this part because I thought I was about to have a full-on panic attack. After a minute or so of the most intense panicked silence I've ever experienced, a different noise started. I know it sounds cliche, but the only way I can describe it was big heavy footsteps coming up the stairs towards us, and it was definitely getting louder. I freaked out. I turned to the group and said, "Fuck this, let's go," and ripped open the first door I could see and began running across whatever floor that was. You want to talk about an adrenaline rush? Oh man. I might have been able to enjoy it if I wasn't scared shitless. Pun intended. The 6 of us are sprinting across this building trying to find another stairwell, dodging hanging electrical wires and broken drywall with me at the helm. After a while, I slow down and motion everyone to stop so we could listen. Other than all of our heavy breathing, I couldn't hear anything. I took a step forward and crunched a fluorescent light bulb that was lying on the ground that I couldn't see. The sound literally echoed and we all gasped. Immediately after the bulb shattered, we all heard heavy footsteps start to run on the floor directly above us. We panicked again and sprinted forward, desperately trying to find a stairwell. Luckily, the footsteps ran in the other direction of where we were heading, and we reached the halfway point of the building without incident. The building is divided down the middle with 4 sets of stairwells, 2 for each wing. We ran down to what we hoped was the 3rd floor. Windows and features of the building started to look familiar, and my oh shit bar went down to a 9 out of 10. Maybe we were going to get out of here. And then I remembered that there were cops waiting for us, so my hope didn't last long. We found the window that we came in. Now this was the hard part. We devised a plan where 3 of us would climb out first, head to the brush and hunker down. If the coast was clear, I would send a blank text message to someone in the second group, and that was the signal that it was okay to climb out. I was in the first group. Essentially, if things went sour, I was going to end up in jail and the second group would be waiting in the access window room until the cops broke in, or until they left, which would presumably take several hours. So me and my 2 friends climbed out the window as quietly as possible, which wasn't quiet at all considering it's a 6-foot drop to a gravel rooftop, not to mention my panicked breathing. We hopped the access roof and jumped down, no time for careful climbing, and hugged the wall as we ran to the corner. My friend, who was now leading, peeked his head around the corner, gave the signal that it was clear, and we bolted across to the brush. When we thought we were hidden, we turned to scope the building, and there were no cops to be found. Either they gave up and left, in which case, what the hell was in the building with us? Or they were in the building trying to find us. So I tapped the send button I had my thumb hovering over, and 3 minutes later Group 2 joined us in the brush. We pushed our way through the foliage and into an adjacent neighborhood where we finally breathed huge sighs of relief and split up to go find our separate cars. So that was easily the scariest thing that has happened to me in my life so far. I can't confirm exactly what happened because we didn't see any cops or security when we bolted. But there was definitely someone, or something, in that building with us. I assumed the repetitive banging noise was a mag light hitting a pole or support beam, but I have no idea how someone could have gotten into our stairwell that fast to make footstep noises. Maybe some other kids snuck in that same night, but that's pretty doubtful too. I feel like we would have heard them or noticed them beforehand. I mean, you have to get down the main drive somehow to get to the window, which we had a perfect view of from the roof. I don't know. It still creeps me out. In Anoka County, Minnesota, there's an old mental asylum that borders the high school. I'm talking right up next to it, sharing a fence and everything. My mom had said that when she went to school there in the 1970s, she'd see patients walking around the grounds. Sometimes they'd come right up to the fence edge and watch while Mom's tennis team practiced. I guess there are old graves in one of the courtyard corners too, which makes sense as it's been a run-a hospital since 1898. It no longer serves as a mental hospital, but is now a recovery center for troubled teens and addicts. The underground tunnels are non-functioning and for all intents and purposes closed, but it is still patrolled. I can't imagine recovering from substance abuse or being in juvenile detention in a place with that history. With this kind of reputation, obviously it's been victim to a number of stupid teens vandalizing, sneaking onto the property to ghost hunt or whatever. Also, obviously I've been one of them. In 2005, I was in high school and dating this guy named Max, who volunteered for the fire department. His dad was fire chief. All the minor volunteers were given a rotation of duties. Now, normally, a minor volunteer wouldn't be asked to patrol at the asylum, but since Max's dad was chief, and Max had been volunteering for 3 years now, and they were understaffed because of a massive storm, he had asked if Max could patrol the tunnels for a week to help out. This was our chance. I was in the middle of finals, but was done with school for that year that Thursday. I thought a cool end-of-school year exploration of the building would be an epic summer starter. He said he'd let me know after his first night what it was like and if I'd even be able to sneak down there. On Tuesday morning, I heard from him before I went to class saying that the tunnels were cool and creepy. He said he patrolled alone, so I should be able to sneak down there with him for that bit, but might not be able to patrol with him on the actual grounds perimeter, which was fine. All I really cared about were the tunnels. He also said to bring a flashlight because there was a short period of time where he had to turn off the light before turning on another and the wiring was all wonky. On Wednesday morning, he said there was a smell down there and I should bring water shoes. Some of the flooding had backed up into the tunnels and the smell was likely a sewage break or drowned rats. The water wasn't very deep, but it was gross to him. On Thursday morning, he told me to meet him on the path behind the asylum at 10 p.m. It ran along the river. I was a little creeped out by the idea of walking alone on that path at night, but decided it would be fine. I told my friend Anna where I'd be and said I'd text her a code word every hour to let her know I was okay. The code was a line of lyrics from a Tenacious D song, 1 word each hour, sent in order. I may like creepy things, but I'm a huge pansy. I dressed in ghost hunter stuff, i.e. all black, with a hood and my rain boots. I held my keys in my hand like a weapon. You know, that thing you do in case someone attacks you and you think, I'll jab them with my keys and they'll leave me alone. Knock on wood. Max was waiting there when I got there, so I didn't have to wait alone, which was great. We started weaving our way through the property, all the while avoiding light posts. We got to the entrance. It was one of those concrete entryways that immediately led to descending stairs. We headed in. The usual graffiti was present, iterations of fuck and penis sketches, and a bit of that was just the word no repeating. I turned on my flashlight and we headed down. At the base of the stairs, it smelled like absolute shit. It was also at least 10 degrees cooler. He clicked on the light switch at our end and we started off. There was nothing remarkable about the tunnel. It was just a bunch of empty, mostly doorless rooms, an inch or so of putrid smelling water, and a few pieces of destroyed furniture. I routinely looked through every room and he waited in the main tunnel. The rooms were 10-foot cubes. I both expected to find something horrible and also feared I'd find something ghastly. Most of the rooms were harmless, just kind of gross. Honestly, I was slightly disappointed. It hadn't been the adrenaline rush I had hoped for. There were 4 rooms left at the other end that looked particularly beat up. He explained that they had been holding cells for patients that were having episodes and needed isolation. These were the only rooms with intact doors. I made him come in with me because I was paranoid that the door would suddenly slam shut and there was no way I was going to be haunted alone. I started inspecting. Nothing interesting in the first 2 rooms. In the 3rd room, I found some indents on the bottom corner of the back wall. After inspecting for a bit, I realized they were fingernail marks. The worst part about them was imagining the position someone would have to be in to make them, crouching on the floor with their back to the door. I found a few more spots of claw marks, all bundled together, marks going in all different directions. Most of them were clustered around the bottom of the room or corners, but there was one group of scratches about 9 feet up on a wall. I guess maybe the person was standing on a bed and just going to town. But the unnatural height bothered me. At this point, that was enough. I really didn't need a lot of creepy stuff to fill my quota, so I was ready to leave. Max understood, but also thought I should check out the last room since I'd looked in all the others. I wanted to leave, but my OCD and curiosity was like, you totally need to look in that last room. You have to complete the dungeon crawl. So I went in and made him stand right by me. We started going over the walls, but found nothing. I've kept going back to the back corner, since that's where I'd found the first marks in the other room. I bent down to look at what I thought was another mark on the wall, and noticed there were marks on the floor. It was hard to see since there was water all over, but by swishing my foot back and forth, I could make out the word "no" repeating. Now I was done. I stood up and turned to Max and then stopped. We'd been so focused on looking at the floor with the flashlight, we didn't realize the light in the tunnel had gone out. I all out screamed. Max grabbed the light from my hand and charged toward the opening. I followed in a panic. He looked one way, then the other with the light before dashing toward the stairwell to hit the corresponding light switch. I waited in the hallway, pressed against the wall, eyes down. I didn't want to close them, even though I couldn't see anything anyway, but I didn't want to look around. I was afraid I'd see a shape in the claw mark room across from me. Moments later, Max had the tunnel light on and was grabbing my arm. Thank God he's an emergency responder and could just act on instinct. I was useless. We ran up the stairs and out the other side. I had another brief moment of panic when he took the flashlight and went back down to turn the light back off to complete his patrol. I thought for sure he would be pulled out of view by an invisible force or that some terrible creature would come crawling up the stairs after me. But it was nothing like that. Thing is, I'd never go back, but Max had one more night on patrol. I'm what you like to call an urban explorer. This hobby usually entails traveling quite a bit and then trying to find any abandoned structures or areas that are worth taking a look at. Sometimes I'd travel rather far from home, maybe even out of state, and then other times I'd go to other cities or go a few more miles away from where I live. This time, however, I did not have that kind of benefit of traveling so far away due to the fact that the economy had gotten so bad and my job wasn't paying as well. Because of this, if I wanted to explore any abandoned places, I would have to keep to the more local areas. I started urbexing a few years ago when I first moved into my current house. I had just settled in and I had seen every room in the house, including the basement. But it wasn't long before I noticed something strange about the basement floor. In the center of the room, there was a small square wooden hatch with a metal handle attached to it. When I saw this, I thought there might be some storage area underneath, but what I had found was much better than that. I opened the hatch and looked inside. There was a short metal ladder leading directly downwards to a room underneath. It immediately surprised me, but it also gave me great excitement at the discovery. I didn't expect to find a sub-basement, and such a thing isn't common in most homes. The room was difficult to see into as there was no light source inside, so I went and grabbed a flashlight from upstairs. I came back and went down the ladder while shining the flashlight inside. It was a small, narrow hallway with a storage closet, and there wasn't much else there. It was mostly empty with a few bits of trash and blueprints lying around, but there wasn't any furniture in any other rooms. Anticlimactic, I know, but it didn't cease to amaze and excite me as this was a great surprise. The place looked dusty and rather old, as did the hatch, and I assumed that this was an unused part of the house. Ever since then, I have been trying to find new abandoned areas to explore and satisfy my curiosity. On a weekend, I had decided to prepare for my next venture, and when I got back from the store, I did some research on the surrounding areas for any new locations to check out. Most of the research yielded the same places that I'd already explored long ago, but there was one particular area which I hadn't explored yet, and for good reason. It was an area I'd deliberately avoided because it was poverty-stricken, filled with crime, and mostly consisted of run-down buildings. It was the kind of place you would go several miles around to get to your job just to avoid going through it. Normally I would stay away from such a place, and I actually did that for a long time. But I hadn't explored any new areas in several months, and I was getting anxious because my desire for exploration was at an all-time high. So I decided to push away any doubts or fears of this particular area so I could finally explore the remaining abandoned places that I hadn't been to before. The next Saturday, I drove my car up to that part of town, which was a few miles away, and I drove slowly around the neighborhood to see if I could spot any particular abandoned buildings that were both isolated and worth going into. The town was just as I had expected. Most of the structures were boarded up and windows and closed off doors. Those that were not like this were far and few between, and pretty much all of these structures looked old and run down. Some of these places looked like they had been abandoned a long time ago, but I didn't want to explore them considering they were surrounded by other inhabited homes and apartments. If I had decided to break into any of these places, there was a good chance that somebody from across the street or a neighbor might notice and possibly call the police. There was also the risk of running into some homeless people or some meth addicts living in these vacant lots. This wasn't a risk I wanted to take, so I kept driving around hoping I would find some abandoned places that were somewhat isolated from the rest of the area. It took me a while, but I came across one particular road which led out from the neighborhood into a large but mostly empty field. I parked my car alongside the road, not too far from this road, and I hoped that my car wasn't going to get towed. I walked down the road for a long time. It must have been just a few short miles where I had started, and the surrounding field looked relatively empty. There weren't really any buildings for the first mile or so, and there weren't any trees either. The field went all around in the different directions for several miles, and I kept going in a zigzag type pattern. It took me around half an hour before I reached a small abandoned house which was completely isolated from any other structures or people. The only thing that surrounded it was the large unkempt field and the few bushes here and there. This was a good thing because it meant that there was very little risk of me getting caught, and since this house was farther away from the local area, I had hoped that it wasn't going to be filled with junkies or hobos. This would be unlikely, however, due to the very nature of such places, despite my wishful thinking. I approached the premises very slowly and carefully, is to examine if there was anyone else there. There was trash and evidence of inhabitancy lying all around outside the building, but I didn't see anybody inside from the windows. I went around the back of the house and went in through the door. Once again, I carefully went around the home to explore and to make sure that there was nobody there at the time. Thankfully, there wasn't anyone downstairs, but was plenty of trash and debris lying around, just like outside. There wasn't anything valuable though, as all the furniture and scraps of the home had mostly likely been taken long ago. Graffiti also littered the walls in various parts of the house, which showed that this was a popular spot for many other people. Once I finished searching the downstairs, I went around the back, where the staircase was at, and went upstairs. The area up here was pretty much the same as the rest of the house, and it didn't take me long to finish my search. I came upon the very last room, which appeared to be some kind of office according to the various bits of paper and spare furniture parts lying around, and I stepped inside. Immediately I was greeted by a disturbing sight in the far right corner of the room. A person's skeleton had been lying on the ground, and two things were in both hands. In the left hand, there was a handgun, and in the other there was a note of some sort. I was struck with surprise when I had made the discovery, but after some thought I figured it was to be expected in such a place. I was surprised because I hadn't found a body or a skeleton of any kind in my previous expeditions, and this was the first time I had. But the surrounding areas, like I said before, were notorious for crime and poverty. So finding somebody like this didn't seem completely out of place, but some bit of surprise still took hold despite this. I tried taking a look at the note, but I couldn't read the vast majority of the person's handwriting due to time taking its toll and poor penmanship. But I was able to read the person's signature, and that was really all I couldn't understand in the note. Believe it or not, that was the first time I'd run into something like that, but it wasn't the last time. At first I thought it was just a strange and unfortunate finding, but it was later that I realized I was completely wrong. It wasn't long before I went exploring again, at another place, and it was here I had found another skeleton. This time it wasn't as clear as to their cause of death, but I wasn't so concerned with that as much as the fact I had found a dead person. They did have a note in their right hand, but reading it proved very difficult, and the signature was, once again, the only thing I could really make out. Keep in mind that this was just after exploring the last place, which also had a dead person inside. That was the second time I had encountered a dead person's skeleton inside an abandoned area, and it was right after I had found the first one. I went on another venture not too long after the first and came across another abandoned structure which had a skeleton inside. That was 2 times in a row, and I thought that it was just a mere unfortunate coincidence. Oh, how wrong was I. Every single other place that I've explored since then has had a dead person inside with a note, either on them or near them. The means of death have been ambiguous at times and more obvious at others. The note would usually be virtually impossible to read, except for the signature, just like all the other notes. After a while, it became too much, and I had to take a long break from urban exploration. These discoveries were disturbing each time, and they never stopped. That's why I thought something paranormal or sinister was going on, and it somehow involved me. That's what really frightened me, and I couldn't continue exploring any longer. But I still considered myself a rational person, and so I tried to reason to myself that I was simply imagining all of this. I tried to tell myself that maybe all of this wasn't even real, and I just needed some medication or to see a doctor. But I haven't had a single issue in my past regarding mental illness, and I've never had any hallucinations before. And there was no way that I could have just kept on stumbling on more dead people and a note, as there was no way this was just a coincidence. That was only just a week ago, but now something else has happened. I had decided to use that sub-basement I had found a long time ago as a storage area. Just an hour ago, I had gone down there to grab some supplies for some work I needed to get done, and I noticed something immediately odd about the center of the room. On the ceiling, there was a rope tied around a loose wooden plank, and it was shaped like a noose. When I saw this, I felt fear striking the very core of my being, and I couldn't do anything else but try to reason why that rope was there. There wasn't anybody else in the house, and I had no recollection of tying the rope, nor was it there before, so how could it have gotten here now? I'm writing all of this down on a few spare pages of paper just in case something happens to me. I think something very strange or terrifying is happening to me, and I don't know what it is. I grew up in Indiana, and when I was 17 I got my first car and started exploring. I live somewhere pretty suburban, but if you drive an hour south, you are in the middle of nowhere. Tons of cornfields and abandoned houses. My friend and I started driving out there a lot and started going to these abandoned houses and exploring them. My dad bought a camera for the family a bit earlier, so I would take that and shoot some photos of the house. We got really good at finding them too. We looked out for the normal signs, broken mailboxes, long grass, heavy wear on the house, etc. But sometimes we were still worried about whether or not some of the places we went to were completely abandoned. The best houses don't look as obvious from the outside. Like if a house looks like it's in a decent condition, it's more likely to have stuff inside it. If it's super obvious, like all broken windows, missing a door, kids probably already found it and spray painted it and broke shit. We were really respectful about it and wanted to explore places other people didn't, so we looked for more subtle places. I remember my friend and I were coming back from a concert in Indianapolis in the summer. We spent that night at my cousin's place in the city, since the drive back is really long. We left during the day and started taking alternate routes back to try and find any cool places to explore. We were driving down this long dirt road, one of those that doesn't even have a name and is called like Country Road 3282 or whatever. After a while, we see a long dirt driveway come out to the left, and in the distance we see this really broken house. We pulled into the driveway and drove down. It was probably a quarter mile long. There was a big no trespassing sign, which usually means the place is definitely abandoned. I know that sounds stupid, but it was something that made us way more confident in a house. We park and walk up to it. The door was falling off and the windows were cracked. Inside the house, everything was thrown around. It had that normal musty abandoned house smell, but it smelled stronger, like more rotten kind of, and just really heavy. I don't know how to describe it. It was really weird. I figured since most of the shit in the house was thrown around and moldy and rotten, it was probably just that. There was this tiny room to the side, but it was completely dark, so we walked past it. We walked towards the stairs and started stepping over broken glass, like a lot of it. It's common to see broken glass on the ground, but a huge area was completely covered in it. It made loud cracks as we walked. I started feeling worried. We walked up the stairs, which were also covered in the glass. At the top, there was a long hallway. 2 rooms were open on the side, and at the end was a closed door. The 2 rooms were mostly empty. I saw a bunch of garbage in one room. Black hoses, mason jars, Coke bottles with tubing. We kept walking and went up to the door and opened it. Suddenly the smell hit us hard. It was this super strong chemical rotting odor. And then we spot him. There was a guy in the room. He was really frail, super gaunt. He has really baggy clothes and sores all over his face. He was holding a rifle and staring right at us. I couldn't speak. I see some beakers, bottles, and tubing on this table that looked like a really shitty science fair project. He lifts the gun up and we sprint out. We got out of the house, started the car, and drove off. We called the police, and it turns out he and a friend were squatting the place and running a meth lab. The police found the one guy upstairs, and the other guy was in that really dark room downstairs. He heard our car come and was hiding in there and watched us. I have no clue why he didn't try to stop us. He was probably just tweaking out really hard. The broken glass was there to make a noise to alert them when someone else was inside. I feel so lucky to be alive and safe, because they could have easily killed us and nobody would have known we were there, and they would have been safe. I haven't gone exploring abandoned houses since that. A few miles away from my house is an abandoned town called Diamond City, North Carolina. There's not much info available on this town, so I will give you a little backstory. Diamond City was a community founded by a railroad company that was building tracks in the area. It existed from 1868 to 1927 before people slowly moved away as the town lost its shine. In its day, it had a post office, general stores, a school, and even a hotel. In 1927, after everyone almost moved away, a fire swept through the town, destroying everything that was left. Nowadays, it's nothing more than a giant grid of dirt roads and woods used for logging and hunting. However, it's been the subject of plenty of ghost stories, and you are guaranteed to feel a creepy vibe the whole time you are there. The atmosphere and everything just feels so different. It's super quiet, and you always feel like you're being watched. Now for the spooky urban legends. My friend's mother, Mrs. Shirley, has lived very close to Diamond City her whole life and is kind of recognized as the expert on it around the county. Anytime someone had an experience out there, they came to her to see what she could make of it. These are the most notable legends she has told me about. Glowing lights. I'm sure you're familiar with this type of phenomenon. Basically, people have said if you park your car at the beginning of Diamond City, if you stare down the path, you will begin to see lights that glow and grow for a short time until they disappear. It's said that these lights are the ghosts of old railroad workers. It's very common for your car to mysteriously shut off shortly after seeing these lights. It often won't start back up for another 30 minutes to an hour. Shadow people. There was a rumor that people used to practice black magic out there in the 70s and summon these shadow people, as well as other spirits. People also claim to see handprints from them on their cars, but that can be easily debunked in my opinion. The Black Panther. This one honestly sounds like an urban legend to me. I never looked into it though. But Mrs. Shirley said back when she was a little girl, there was a circus train coming through Diamond City and derailed somehow. All of the animals on the train either died or ran off, but they were able to round them all up, except for the ringmaster's Black Panther that he had raised from a cub. He took off looking for it, and neither of them were ever found. It was assumed that the panther killed him and went on its own way. People have claimed to see the panther, or its ghost, come through their yard for decades now. The Red Demon. This is the most well-known legend of Diamond City. It's been told by several people that when they went out to Diamond City at night with their buddies, one person out of that group saw a red demon staring straight at them. The thing about the Red Demon is that if you see him, you're the only one who sees it, and it's a sign that you will die soon or be the first of the group to die. Everyone who claimed to have seen it is now dead. I only know of one detailed story pertaining to this. The exorcism incident. This one still gives me the creeps. It seems very likely to be true and isn't widely known about. According to Miss Shirley, there was a young girl from somewhere in the county who was believed to be possessed in the early 1920s. Since there were almost no residents in the town at this point, a priest decided to perform an exorcism on the girl at the old hotel in Diamond City. At some point during the exorcism, Shit hits the fan and the girl escaped by jumping through a glass window, running off into the night, all cut up with nothing but her nightgown. They never found any sign of her after that. I will get to why I believe this is to be true later. Now for my experience. One night a few summers ago, I was hanging with some friends and bandmates when we got to talking about Diamond City. Half had never heard of it, so we decided to load up 3 cars full of us and headed out there. On the way there, 2 of my bandmates, Corey and David, realized that they had been here once before with a mutual friend. It's worth noting that they lived an hour away from this area, so they had no idea what Diamond City was until our mutual friend first took them there and only told them it was an abandoned town with a creepy vibe. On Corey and David's first trip, they drove all the way to the end of the main dirt road, trying to spook each other along the way. Once they were at the end and in the process of turning around, David notices something outside of his window on the side of the road. When he turns and focuses his eyes on it, he realized he was looking straight into the eyes of a little girl. He says she basically looked like a more horrifying female version of Gollum from Lord of the Rings. Her eyes were very foggy and glassy with specks of dark, busted blood vessels here and there. Her skin was very dirty, yet noticeably pale, veiny, and scarred. She had some wounds that looked like she was rotting and decaying, but still fully intact. She had some strands of her hair still hanging onto her head that were lightly floating in the wind. All she was wearing was a dirty nightgown. He obviously flips his shit at the sight of her and tells his friends to look, but by that time she was already gone. I instantly knew that he had to have seen the little girl who escaped her exorcism. At the time David told me this, I had only learned of the exorcism story, so I hadn't even thought about it while I was hyping my friends up with all the stories I knew about the place. I was still skeptical about his story, so before I told him about the exorcism, I asked him more details on what he saw, if he had heard anything about it, what he thought it might be, etc. His answers led me to believe he was telling the truth and had no idea about her. So I told him what I knew, and he about shit his pants. He was immediately a nervous wreck, worrying that he would see her again now that he knew he wasn't just seeing things. Spoiler, we didn't see her. By the time David and I finished talking about the little girl, our group had driven to the end of Diamond City, hung out for a little bit, and decided to head back. On the way out, I was driving in the 3rd car behind everyone. When we reached the last intersection before the exit gate, the cars in front of me stopped suddenly. My friend in the first car gets out, walks up to my window and said, "Look at the beginning of the path." I got out of the car and walked to the front of the line and couldn't believe what I saw. About a half a mile ahead of us, there was a glowing ball of fire at the start of the path, but it didn't look like a normal fire. It looked so unnatural that my first instinct was to look away from it, like I shouldn't be looking at it. It looked like bad CGI. It moved like it was swirling in the air just above the ground. It was mostly orange, lighter than the usual orange glow of fire, and there looked like to be that there were traces of glowing white and blue within it. After a few seconds, the ball of fire started to grow. The flames grew up to about 15 feet and shrunk and grew a few times before it reached its peak. It started to die down until it turned into a very small ball of fire and disappeared. As we all stood there with our mouths agape trying to figure out what to say, we looked back into the direction of where the fire was, and suddenly a pair of headlights appeared and started creeping towards us. I was thinking, okay, I guess that makes sense. Some hunters are out here messing with us, and now they're coming to ask us to leave. But then one of the headlights went out, and then the second one did. We sat there, waiting for a truck to approach us because it would have blocked the path until they got to our intersection to turn around, but nothing ever came. No car, no truck, no side road for them to turn on. Nothing. At this point, we just said, fuck it, and drove out. As soon as we passed the spot where the fire was, all 3 cars turned off. We all got out and checked on all the cars, but nothing was wrong with them. They just wouldn't start. After hanging out for 20 minutes, the feeling of being watched started to dissolve. Our cars finally started up, and we all went home spooked and confused, out of our minds. Hello everyone, and thank you for listening to another episode. I work really hard on these, so if you gave me a follow or just showed this to your friends, got the word around, I'd be extremely appreciated. You can also support by subscribing to the channel if you just look in the description box of the podcast. If you have any creepy stories of your own, send your submissions to talesfromthebud@gmail.com. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, look in the box below. Thank you all so much, and I will be speaking with you again soon.